usual, this conference will be recorded after the music, and then you can wait for, yeah, and then you can wait.
Exactly.
You can wait about 5 seconds and after that little message,
Okay.
and start the press conference.
Perfect. So anything you say from this moment on could be heard in a conference call. Please stand by.
This conference is being recorded. Cette conférence est enregistrée.
Good morning and welcome to this technical briefing. Bienvenue à tous les participants ce matin.
Welcome to all participants this morning for this
This
briefing.
morning we provide updates to Canada's response to the situation in Afghanistan. La séance portera sur la réponse du gouvernement du Canada.
The briefing will be on Canada's response to the situation in Afghanistan. We have three interveners with us this morning.
From the Department of National Defence, we have General Wayne Eyre, Chief of Defence Staff. From Global Affairs Canada, Associate Deputy Minister Cindy Thomas-Eisen. And for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, we have Assistant Deputy Minister Danielle Mills. This briefing is for journalists only. It's for attribution and may be recorded for broadcast. Cette séance d'information est réservée pour les journalistes.
This briefing is for journalists only, for attribution, and the briefing may be recorded for broadcast.
From each of the speakers and then begin the question and answer period. As usual, one question and a brief follow-up per person, please. After
opening statements, we will open the floor to questions. We would ask reporters to ask a brief question and a brief follow-up.
Thank you for joining us this morning. I will now hand things over to our first guest speaker, our DND participant, General Wayne Eyre. Good morning, General. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. I would like to begin today by acknowledging that I'm speaking from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I'll be providing you an update on Operation Aegis, the Canadian Armed Forces contribution to the government of Canada's effort to evacuate Afghan nationals and Canadian citizens from Kabul, Afghanistan. Comme l'a souligné hier le ministre Sajjan des États-Unis ont confirmé
Sajjan has already said, the U.S. has said that operations in Kabul will end on August 31. Canada and our multinational partners for the airlift will have to end their operations and bring back their personnel, resources, and aircraft. So all the other countries will have to withdraw from the airport before the Americans can end their mission, and this includes defending the airport.
Our evacuation operations have ceased, and the majority of personnel departed Hamid Karzai International Airport approximately 8 hours ago. A small contingent remains on the ground to support and coordinate our air bridge for the retrograde of Allied forces while conditions permit. Before the airport was closed due to the Taliban, Canada had flown 9 flights out of Kabul, bringing over 800 people back to Canada, and supported the evacuation of the Canadian mission. On August 19th, once the airport had been resecured by our allies, Canadian Armed Forces flights to and from the airport resumed. Since you were briefed yesterday by ministers, the Canadian Armed Forces brought in and secured transit for approximately another 1,000 Afghans destined for Canada. Half of those flew out on a Canadian C-17 last night, while the remainder departed on U.S. aircraft. Thanks to the heroic efforts of our armed forces, our allies, our global affairs and IRCC colleagues, and the bravery of Afghans, Canada successfully transported or facilitated the transport of approximately 3,700 evacuees. Now, this number will be confirmed in the coming days. These
evacuated persons include Canadian citizens and permanent residents, members of their families, citizens of allied countries, and people who have a significant attachment with Canada, people who have helped Canadians or our allies.
Last night with the U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff he told me that this was the largest military evacuation in history. The Canadian Armed Forces contributed to these efforts by facilitating the movement of equipment, humanitarian supplies, and most importantly, people. For our part, the depth of our relationships with the US, the UK, and other allies made this all possible. We stayed in Afghanistan for as long as we could. We were amongst the last to cease evacuation operations. We wish we could have stayed longer and rescued everyone who was so desperate to leave. That we could not is truly heartbreaking. But the circumstances on the ground rapidly deteriorated. Now, this is an extraordinary humanitarian crisis, but make no mistake, this is a crisis of the Taliban's. In the face of tremendous adversity, what our armed forces have accomplished through Operation Aegis is nothing short of extraordinary. Our strategic lift capabilities allowed us to rapidly deploy our forces to the other side of the world into a country where we have not had significant military presence in 7 years. We also deployed armed forces capabilities, many currently in Kuwait as part of Joint Task Force Impact to support this mission. Every person, aircraft, piece of equipment involved in the operation was pushed to the limit towards a single goal, evacuating as many people as humanly possible. Our
military personnel worked relentlessly for days on end. They gave their own food and their own water to starving Afghans desperately needing water at the airport, and our special forces personnel helped secure the airport to help evacuate as many people as possible, vulnerable people. Lastly, our special forces have begun to work outside of the perimeter. They did so early in the operation, and these people were amongst the last of the allies to come back within the security zone.
Yeah, at the outset, we knew this operation could not be micromanaged from Ottawa. So we pushed authorities and required resources down to enable maximum flexibility, and our troops made full use of them. The conditions our armed forces members were working under were unlike anything we've seen in decades, even during our previous mission in Afghanistan. The threats around the airport were significant and dynamic. Throughout the operation, we received word of multiple imminent attacks, which necessitated changes to our plans on the ground and demanded maximum adaptability and agility on the part of our people. Non-combatant evacuations operations are inherently complex, but all told, this operation has been one of the largest, most complex, and dangerous in modern history. And operations like this take a tremendous toll on our people. Nous avons tous suivi avec effroi les événements.
Followed with horror the events that have unfolded in Afghanistan in the last few weeks. It was an emotionally charged period of time. Some people were able to make it out, whereas others not.
As the acting chief of defense staff, my greatest concern now is for the wellness of our troops involved. They have witnessed horrific things. They have faced incredible dangers. And the feeling of helplessness and guilt that arises from having to leave people behind can be overwhelming. You know, the same can be said for those of us working in Canada. You know, like so many of our CAF members and our veterans, like so many of you in the media, and like so many others, you know, I have received emails from people I worked with during my tours in Afghanistan who are desperate to get out or get their families out. Their pleas and the photos of the families in terrible situations that accompany many of them are heart-wrenching. They tear at our souls. And we
could do nothing other but to direct these poor people towards information sources, hoping that they would be able to find a way towards security when we did everything we could.
No matter what jobs we do, no matter what training we go through, No matter what military experience we have, we are human, and these horrifying stories will stay with us, in many cases, in most cases, for life. So caring for our people will be a priority as this operation winds up. Understanding that burden, I ask our members to focus on the thousands of lives that they saved. As they come back, they will be debriefed. They'll be given the time they need to decompress. We'll support them, ensure their well-being, and make sure they know how proud we are of them. Their experiences have not been made any easier by the fact this operation was carried out under intense and often misinformed public scrutiny and criticism. Now, for obvious reasons, operational details of what we were doing had to be kept quiet. So into that silence, some people interjected their own narratives without any real knowledge of the facts, adding to the confusion. Mais la vérité est très différente.
But the truth is very different, even if the Kabul airport was the scene of desperation which broke our hearts. In the coming days, you are going to hear tales of heroism on the part of people who participated in the operation, and we need to hear what they have to say.
Dedication, determination, and compassion. How the heroism of our Canadian troops saved and changed thousands of lives. You'll hear about the CAF members who cared for a new mother and the baby she'd given birth to approximately 15 hours before boarding a flight, making sure she and the infant made it to safety. You'll
hear stories of the little girl, the little Afghan girl who followed a military member onto a flight. She asked her father, she told her father she wanted to be a policewoman, and he said that in Canada, women can become members of police forces. And the little girl said that she would like to become a police officer when she grows up.
A little Afghan boy who so admired one of our soldiers that he wouldn't leave his side as the soldier carried out his work during an evacuation flight, and how that soldier cared for the boy, who was about the same age as his own son, waiting for him to return safely home to Canada. Now, the events of recent weeks have, not surprisingly, caused many of us to ask about our past involvement in Afghanistan. Was it worth it? My personal answer is time will tell. I know we made a difference in thousands of lives while we were there, and every one of those lives counts as a win. We'll see if that's enough. Finally, I want to thank our Canadian Armed Forces families, the families of our fallen, and the many veterans that have been following these events closely, many of whom have been advocating for a better life for Afghan nationals. Thank you for your strength, compassion, and resolve during these difficult times. Canadians can be immensely proud of the work our team has been doing under incredibly dangerous and chaotic conditions in recent weeks. I know I am, and I thank them for their courage, ingenuity, and peerless professionalism. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, General. Now we go to Cindy Turmer-Sison of Global Affairs Canada.
Aujourd'hui est une journée
Good
très
morning.
difficile.
Today is a very difficult day.
While we are pleased that we have been able to assist a significant number of Canadians, permanent residents, and their families to leave Afghanistan in recent days, we recognize that today's announcement will be distressing news for those who are still in Afghanistan and wish to leave. We know that it will also be distressing for their families and loved ones, and for all who have ties to Afghanistan. That includes many of us who work at Global Affairs Canada. C'est la première journée de cette opération.
It's the first
Nous
day
nous sommes engagés à évacuer
of this operation where we committed to evacuating as many Canadians, permanent citizens, and vulnerable Afghans and to do so for as long as possible. The end of this evacuation effort does not mean the end of Canada's support for the Afghan people.
In the coming weeks and months, we will continue to work with our allies to explore options to provide whatever support we can to Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and vulnerable Afghans who remain in the country. Please rest assured that we will spare no effort to help. Although our ability to provide assistance in Afghanistan is extremely limited at this time, consular support continues to be available to Canadians in Afghanistan. We are actively coordinating with allies in the region and bilaterally to determine which options might be available to assist our citizens and Afghans who assisted the Government of Canada, as well as other vulnerable Afghans. Dès le début de cette crise,
from the start of this crisis, stakeholders from the Monitoring and Intervention Center have stood by to respond to phone calls and emails from Afghans seeking help and advice. Currently, dozens of them are working 24/7 on a rotational basis.
We encourage Canadians still in the country to stay in contact with us through the center. Reach out to us. Responders are available 24/7 and can be reached at 1-613-996-8885. Our officials will keep in contact with those who call on us for help. We will do so for as long as needed. We will keep in touch using whatever is the most effective way to help them stay safe, be it by phone, email, or text message. Les Canadiens et les résidents permanents
Canadians and permanent residents who are able to leave Afghanistan securely and who need help in a third country can communicate with the nearest Canadian office. In the meantime, until the security situation becomes more stabilized, the Government of Canada encourages people who are still in Afghanistan to find a safe place.
In Afghanistan, if you need to move to a safer location, please do so with great caution. Use your judgment to decide the best time and the safest means to do so. Assess the risk carefully as you take the necessary steps to ensure your security and that of your family. Our hearts go out to those who find themselves unable to leave Afghanistan and afraid for their safety. Nos conseils et avertissements aux voyageurs sont continuellement mis à jour avec les dernières informations
for travelers are constantly updated based on the information we have. We share this information on social media platforms and Global Affairs Canada's travel website and on the websites of the Canadian Embassy in Afghanistan. To the Canadians who can do so, we strongly recommend that they register with the Canadians abroad. Very worrying for all of us. It's a difficult and especially harrowing day for the Afghan people.
Let me be clear. We are not giving up. We will continue to remain in contact with Afghans on the ground and will support them in any way we can. Pour autant que possible, cela signifie,
to the greatest extent possible, this means, let us hope that Canada will become the new leader.
Le Canada s'est fermement engagé à
From the outset, Canada committed to supporting and evacuating as many people as possible until we could not do so safely anymore. What is unfolding is a real tragedy. The fact that the situation on the ground in Afghanistan has changed much more quickly than expected. We had hoped to evacuate many more people over a longer period of time. However, as you know, the situation today is completely different.
I want to assure you that IRCC has been and continues to work tirelessly to process all applications under our special immigration measures, afin que nous puissions offrir l'asile à toutes les personnes dans le besoin.
So we can offer
We have
asylum to
mobilized
every
our
person who
entire
needs it.
global network, and this operation remains our number one priority. En date de ce matin, le Canada avait reçu
As of
plus
this
de
morning, Canada had
2500
received more than
demandes dans le cadre des
2,500
mesures spéciales
applications under
d'immigration,
these special
ce qui
immigration
représente
measures,
plus de
which
8
represents
000
over
personnes,
8 million
pour lesquelles
persons,
plus de 2
for
tiers ont
which
déjà
over
été
two-thirds
approuvés.
have already been
And
approved.
we will continue to work around the clock to process the remaining application as quickly as possible. Même s'il s'agit d'une situation très difficile,
Even though
les
this is a
personnes en
very difficult
Afghanistan doivent
situation,
maintenant
persons in
évaluer leur
Afghanistan
situation
must now
relative à la
assess
sécurité
their
et
own
faire tout ce qui est en leur
security
pouvoir
situation
pour
and
se
do
protéger
everything they
et
can
protéger
to
leur
protect
famille.
themselves and their families.
Nous assurerons un contact, nous assurerons
We
un contact
will
étroit et
ensure
continu
close
avec eux.
and continuous
Grâce à
communication
notre
with
réseau
them, thanks
d'ambassades
to
partout à travers le
our
monde,
network of embassies
nous veillerons
around
à ce
the
qu'ils
world.
disposent des
We
renseignements
will
et des
ensure that
soutiens
they
les plus
have
récents
the
et qu'ils ont
most
besoin.
up-to-date information and support.
Here in Canada, IRCC is responding every day to thousands of calls and emails received through our dedicated phone line and email. Notre ligne téléphonique est disponible en Dari, en anglais
Our
et
phone
en
line
français.
is available in Dari, French, and English, and we accept the cost
Now
of
that
these
our
calls.
evacuation efforts from Afghanistan have ended, Canada will begin to focus on the next phase of our operation. Ainsi, au cours des prochaines semaines et des
So
prochains
in the
mois,
coming weeks and
nous
months,
collaborerons
we
avec nos
will
partenaires
work with our
internationaux,
international
y compris les
partners,
Nations Unies, sur
including
notre
the
engagement
United Nations,
humanitaire
on our
plus large.
humanitarian
Comme vous le savez,
work.
le Canada s'est
As you
engagé à
know,
réinstaller
Canada
un total
has
de 20
committed
000
to
Afghans
settle
et nous
20,000
continuerons de
Afghans, and
travailler
we will
pour aider les
continue to
Afghans
work to
les
help
plus
the
vulnérables
most
à trouver
vulnerable
l'asile au
Afghans
Canada.
to find asylum in Canada.
Pour les Afghans qui sont déjà
For
arrivés au Canada
Afghans
en
already
toute
here
sécurité,
in Canada
le soutien
who are
offert par les
safely in this
Canadiens
country,
a
the
été
support offered
et
by
est
Canadians
incroyable.
has been just
Merci à tous
incredible.
ceux
Thank
qui
you
ont
to
offert
all of
leur
those
aide
who
et qui
have
participent à
stepped
cette
up
initiative.
and who are participating in this
Pour
initiative.
terminer,
To conclude,
je tiens à nouveau à
I
exprimer mes
again
plus
would like to
sincères regrets
express
à tous
my
ceux qui demeurent
deepest
en
regrets to
Afghanistan,
all those
ainsi
who
qu'à
have
notre
stayed
communauté
behind in
afghane ici au
Afghanistan and
Canada.
also to our Afghan
Nous sommes
community
à vos
here in
côtés.
Canada.
We
We stand
with
with you.
Nous vous soutenons
We will
et nous
support you,
continuerons
and
de
we will
faire tout notre
continue to
possible
do
pour tirer
everything we
hors de
can
danger le plus
to
d'Afghans
make sure as many
vulnérables possible pour les
vulnerable
accueillir ici
Afghans
au
are
Canada.
out of danger and that they can make it
Finalement,
here to
j'aimerais
Canada.
remercier sincèrement
Lastly, I
tous
would
ceux et
like
celles
to
qui
thank
ont
from the bottom of
travaillé
my heart
directement ou
all those people who
indirectement
have worked
à cette
directly and
situation
indirectly
tragique à l'international.
to
Merci. Thank you.
address this tragic international situation.
Merci,
Thank you.
Mills.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
thank you to all of
Mills.
our speakers. And now we're ready to take questions. On est prêt maintenant pour la première question. Operator, we're ready for our first question, please.
Thank you. Merci. We will now take questions from the telephone lines. If you have a question and you are using a speakerphone, please lift your handset before making your selection. If you have a question, please press *1 on the device's keypad. You may cancel your question at any time by pressing *2. So please press *1 at this time if you have a question. There will be a brief pause while the participants register. We thank you for your patience. Nous allons maintenant passer à la période de questions. Si vous utilisez un
We will now
téléphone main
move
libre,
on to the
s'il vous
question
plaît, soulevez le
period.
combiné avant d'effectuer votre sélection. Si vous
Please
désirez
make
poser
sure
une
you're on the
question,
right
veuillez s'il vous
channel.
plaît appuyer sur les touches étoile 1 de
Press
votre
*1.
appareil. Vous pouvez à tout moment annuler
You
votre
can
question
at
en
any
appuyant
moment
sur
choose
le
to
2,
cancel your
étoile 2.
question by pressing
Alors, s'il vous plaît,
*2.
appuyez sur
So,
étoile 1
again,
maintenant pour poser une
*1
question.
now if you
Il y
want to
aura un
ask
court
a
délai
question. There'll be a
vous
brief
permettant de vous
delay
enregistrer dans la file d'attente pour la période de questions.
so you can put yourself
Merci de patienter.
in the line. Thank you for your patience.
The first question is from Ashley Burke from CBC News. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good morning. I'm hoping to get a sense of numbers. You had a list of about 6,800 applicants and about 2/3 of their applications were processed. And I'm hoping to get a sense of how many people you believe that are still there on that list that you weren't able to get out of Afghanistan. There's sort of an estimated number based on your figures.
Ms. Burke, did you have that directed? I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Si je peux me permettre, je peux peut-être commencer à répondre et mes collègues pourront enchaîner
if I may, I can begin to answer the question and my colleagues can complete the
Merci beaucoup
answer.
pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
Comme j'ai mentionné dans mon allocution,
as I said in my presentation, we received over 2,500 applications for a total of about 8,000 people. We've already processed and approved over 2/3 of those applications. What we need to process will be done so on a priority basis over the coming weeks. We've committed to this, and we would like to reassure the applicants that this work is ongoing, and we're going to keep them up to date and give them the necessary information on a timely basis.
That in English before I ask my follow-up question, please.
Go ahead for your follow-up.
Sorry,
I'm sorry, I'm asking if you could please repeat that in English before I ask my follow-up question.
Sure. So thank you very much for the question. So as I mentioned in my introduction, we have received over 2,500 applications, and which totalize around 8,000 people. Out of that, we have processed over 2/3 of them that have already been processed and approved, and the remaining one will be processed, in the upcoming days. And we are prioritizing those applications, and folks around the integrated global network is working really actively to process those remaining applications.
So there are about 8,000 applications, and there were about 2,700 people who got out. So we could do the math and say the rest are still in Afghanistan. Is that what you suggest? And then for my second question, I'm hoping to find out, there are still people in Afghanistan, some Canadian citizens as well. What exactly do they do? And what specifically are you going to do to help those who are in third countries? Will you be pulling them out of refugee camps? Will there be military on the ground? What exactly is the plan? But first, if you could just clarify the numbers. Are we saying there's about, how many people do we think are left in Afghanistan on your list?
Thank you for the question.
Perhaps I could start from. Go ahead, Daniel, and then I'll follow you on the global affairs piece.
Thank you, Cindy. So as I mentioned, we have received a total of 8,000 people due to the special measures of immigration measures. Et comme mon collègue a mentionné, plus de 2,700 ont été évacués de l'Afghanistan, plus les derniers vols qui ont eu lieu hier. Donc, on est en train de faire le décompte. We are looking at presently at, really looking at the remaining population in Afghanistan. But it is important to note that all of those 8,000 applications that we received, not everybody is in Afghanistan. Some of them could be in the neighboring countries. So we have to kind of look at our list, and we will be in a better position to confirm exactly who's still in Afghanistan in the upcoming days.
And perhaps I'll follow on from a global affairs perspective with respect to Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and their families. So we have been able to get hundreds of these individuals out of the country thanks to both the Canadian Armed Forces airlift capability and also seats made available on Allied aircraft. And what we are doing right now is getting a better handle on those numbers. We know that people have gotten on flights from allies and are in third countries, and perhaps going to your question on that, we have mobilized our entire network of embassies and high commissions and consulates around the world to look out for people that are arriving in third countries in order to provide them consular assistance. We are also putting out messaging on our website. We're putting out messaging through press availabilities like this to ensure that people know who to contact, and our diplomatic missions around the world are poised to do that for anyone who has made it out of Afghanistan through other means. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Yasmine Kayat from Radio-Canada. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I would like one of you to repeat in French the exact numbers of persons evacuated and the details with regard to the last operations, as Mr. Eyre talked about in English at the beginning of his presentation.
General Eyre, you're on mute.
Yes, hello. Je peux dire aussi, je suis le modérateur, que tous les détails comme ça, vous pouvez aussi
I would also like to add that if you want to add any information, you can contact us at Media Relations.
C'est juste pour ajouter ça.
I just wanted to add that, but I will now give the floor to one of our presenters.
General, I believe you're on mute.
Je peux confirmer en français que pendant
I can confirm in French that over the last day,
nous avons arrêté nos opérations
we ceased our evacuation operations.
Il y a 8 heures, notre dernier vol
8 hours ago, the last flight left Afghanistan.
Avec notre force opérationnelle.
With our operational forces.
Il reste une petite équipe
there is a small liaison team on the ground to help with the received so far. We also know that part of those approvals were given to Afghans located in third countries. Now, how will we help those who are still in the country? It might be too soon to have an answer, but do you have the beginnings of an answer with regard to the potential evacuation of those people who are still in Afghanistan?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
Nous continuons à venir en aide aux personnes qui sont en
Afghanistan
et qui désirent se rétablir comme réfugiés au Canada. Et ce même après la fin de l'évacuation qu'on a qui a été mentionnée aujourd'hui. Nous allons rester en contact avec ces personnes-là et via email, via SMS, texto, et ils peuvent également en tout temps communiquer avec nous. Comme j'ai mentionné précédemment, nous avons la ligne téléphonique. On a le service, une boîte de courriel qui est dédiée à ces services-là, qui peuvent nous communiquer en tout temps. Donc, vraiment, on veut essayer d'une certaine façon de les rassurer. On ne les laisse pas tomber. On est encore là pour eux. Mais comme vous avez mentionné dans votre question, il est un peu trop tôt pour savoir
your question. It's still too early to know what next steps will be. So we are working closely with my colleague Cindy from Global Affairs Canada to determine next steps. But at this point, it is still too early to know exactly what our opportunities are.
And maybe I'll just add to that from a Global Affairs Canada perspective to say that I think, as you're all aware, both the political and the security situation in Afghanistan are very fluid. We do not know what the next government will look like, what it will be comprised of, and what its approach will be to the departure of foreign nationals or Afghan nationals. But we are working extremely closely with allies and other countries in the region to assess this and to explore options for continuing to support our Canadian citizens, permanent residents, our members of our special immigration program, and also other vulnerable Afghans. Thank you.
Follow-up?
Thank you. She had already asked her follow-up. Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Mike Blanchfield from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Yes. Can you just clarify can you give us a better sense of how many Canadians are actually still left behind in Afghanistan, and if any of the military personnel who are left behind, if they're still working on trying to find them and bring them out on other flights?
I'm happy to take the first part of that question. So as I mentioned in my remarks, we do know that we have been able to take out hundreds of Canadians, permanent residents, and their families. Some of those flights just went out last night, and very large numbers went out both on Canadian and U.S. aircraft, as the Chief of Defense Staff has mentioned. So we are currently in the process of going through all of those numbers and the manifests. We are also, as I mentioned, aware of Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and their families who have ended up in third countries, either through allied flights or by other means. So we are also urgently identifying those individuals in order to provide them support, but also to gain a clearer picture of what the remaining number of Canadians is in the country. So that is a priority effort going forward, and we will be happy to share more information as that becomes available.
And maybe this is a question.
I'll just add from a Canadian Armed Forces perspective, we have a very small team that is focused on helping the coordination with our U.S. partners of extracting their forces on the ground. The reality on the ground is the perimeter of the airport is closed. The Taliban have tightened the noose. Very, very difficult for anybody to get through at this point. And so our team will be focused on working with our American allies to enable their extraction.
Well, as a follow-up then, General, will that include using American air assets perhaps to help, because we don't seem to have that? I mean, maybe there are helicopters and working with them to get more people out?
So at this point, all of our allies have ceased personnel recovery operations, from my understanding. So the answer is no.
Thank you. Merci. Once again, please press *1 on your telephone keypad if you have a question. De nouveau, n'hésitez pas à faire étoile 1.
Again, press *1 on your device if you wish to ask a question. The next question is by Boris Pou from Le Devoir. Thank you very much. First, I would like to know whether you were surprised at the speed at which the Kabul airport had been encircled, and at the speed of events on the ground.
Perhaps I can start from a global affairs perspective. Go ahead, General Air.
I'll just say from from our perspective, warfare is always chaotic and unpredictable, and hindsight is 2020. Based on the information we had at the time, yes, we were surprised by the speed of the Taliban takeover of Kabul, and I'm sure there will be much ink spilt about this. But we have to look at going forward now and what next steps we take. Thank you.
I think General Eyre has said it well. I'll leave it at that.
Follow-up question. You said you will work with our allies going forward, so I would like to know specifically what this means. How exactly are we going to extract the remaining Afghan refugees and bring them to Canada? Does it mean going through other countries? Does it mean taking part in missions on the ground to extract them? What exactly does that mean?
Maybe I'll start and others might want to add. It's a very good question. As I mentioned earlier, the political and security situation on the ground is very fluid. One thing we don't know, for instance, is once the military retrograde is completed, even what kind of airport will be available for civilian flights. So understanding even what kind of transportation options are available is still quite difficult. So those are the things that we are urgently working with allies to understand those avenues for potential departure for those who still wish to leave, and then also gaining an understanding of what might be possible under a new government in Afghanistan. And the composition of that, of course, is also not clear. So all that to say, there is much that remains unknown, but we have daily, multiple times a day, conversations at all levels of the government with allies, with regional countries, to better understand what that future might look like, and therefore what options might be available for us to further assist Canadians, permanent residents, our CIMS applicants, and any vulnerable Afghans that remain on the ground and wish to leave. Thank you.
And I will add, over the coming days, we will be working in the region to move forward the Afghans that we've brought out. Our base in Kuwait is quite full. As I mentioned in my opening comments, we were able to secure spaces on a number of American aircraft that have moved Canadian destined Afghans to a number of different locations in the region. So over the coming days, we'll have to gather those up, bring them to a central location for onward movement to Canada.
Hello, operator. I think we're ready for the next question.
Certainly. Thank you. Merci. And it is from Amanda Connolly from Global News. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good morning. Thank you for holding this briefing with us. General Eyre, I could hear the emotion in your voice this morning when you were giving your opening statement. I think a lot of Canadians watching this right now are emotional as well and are angry. I want to know, are you angry with the Americans for this decision, and how have they justified this to you in the conversations that you've had? Because right now this comes across as the U.S. effectively being willing to accept that Canadians left on the ground, allies, and all the Afghans who put their lives at risk to help us are probably going to die.
No, Amanda, every country has to make their own decision as to what they're going to do. We made ours in 2014. I was in Afghanistan when our country decided to attend our mission. I was at the ceremony at the Canadian Embassy as the flag was lowered. We have to remember that the Taliban have the responsibility for this crisis. The Taliban are the ones who are inflicting this pain on Afghans. The Taliban are the ones who are restricting the ability of so many to get to the airport to be extracted. So put the blame on them, please.
right now to not extend the evacuation effort means that all of the countries that have said that they would be willing to continue doing this work have to pull back as well. Can you break it down for the people who are watching this in plain language? What are the logistical barriers here to countries like Canada stepping in to take control of the airport if the Americans do not want to do that? Is it a lack of intelligence, a lack of technology, a lack of people? Can you just help us understand that?
So there is no country in the world other than the U.S. that's got the capability of projecting force to the other side of the world and securing an airport like that. I'm very happy with the Canadian capabilities that we've been able to exercise here. A decade and a half ago, we would not have been able to do this. Getting the strategic airlift in the form of C-17s has been a game changer. Using C-17s in conjunction with our special forces, in conjunction with strategic communications, has allowed us to be part of this operation. Quite frankly, Canada does not have the capability to do this unilaterally. Neither does any other country besides the U.S.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Ashley Burke, CBC News. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good morning. General Eyre, you mentioned that there was a lot of intense misinformation because the military wasn't releasing details due to operational security. What specifically was the misinformation that you feel was out there?
So for example, many of you have seen a video circulating around that shows Afghans near our security personnel. And we don't know the context of that video. What I do know is our troops were working for days on end with no sleep. The perimeter, the gates were open and closed based on the security threats. Tens of thousands pressed up against the perimeter of that airfield. So that is one example. But I do know that the proof is in the pudding of the thousands that we were able to get out, and I am proud of the work of each and every one of our members who were part of this operation. Whether they were our troops on the ground, whether they were our air crew who were flying in very difficult conditions, whether they are our staff throughout the line of communications coming back to Canada, whether it was our staff back here working incredible hours under very, very intense circumstances to plan this operation, in and amongst all of the other operations that we're conducting, around the world and here at home as well, in the context of a pandemic. So, that's one example.
Clearly explain to us why Canada is ceasing operations today, days before the deadline. Were you given a specific date by the Americans that you had to be off the tarmac, or how did this work? How was this date decided?
So I'm not going to get into specific operational details, but yes, there was a date given when evacuation operations had to cease and had to transition to retrograde operations. And what I mean by that is the extraction of the security forces on the ground. Understanding there are thousands of U.S. troops on the ground that are securing that airport. That is a very, very delicate operation in a contested environment. So without the ability to have the force protection necessary to secure the airport, we would not be able to conduct the evacuation operations. So that was a very deliberate transition date that was part of the planning process to meet the August 31st deadline.
Thank you. Merci. We will now take the last question from Yasmine Kayat from Radio-Canada. Please go ahead. À vous la parole, Madame Kayat.
Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais juste rebondir sur la
Thank you
question
very
de ma
much. I would
collègue
just
parce que
like
des
to
informations
follow up on my
circulent sur une
colleague's
possible ou de la possibilité
question
d'attaque terroriste de l'État
because there's been
islamique aux abords
talk
de l'aéroport.
of the
Est-ce que ce serait
possibility of an
l'une des
attack
raisons
on the part
pour
of
lesquelles on a
ISIS
suspendu les
militants on the
opérations
airport? Is
d'évacuation
this one
afin
of
justement de
the
préserver
reasons why the
et les
evacuation has
Afghans et
been
les personnes aux abords, mais
halted
également les soldats canadiens et les soldats de la
to protect
coalition?
the lives of coalition soldiers, Afghans, and anyone else trying to flee the country?
So the answer is no. But that being said, we continued throughout this operation to be very, very concerned about these reports of threats that came in. And as I mentioned during my opening comments, that our plans changed on a almost minute-to-minute basis as these threat reports came in with specific targets that really demanded the adaptability and flexibility on the ground. Our troops working outside of the perimeter assume force protection risk. In all likelihood, more force protection risk than I was comfortable with to get this mission done. But we took very seriously these threats as they came in. Most recently as including over the last few hours.
Une question de suivi, Madame Kayat?
Madame
Oui, je
Kayat, do
voudrais
you have a
juste savoir,
follow-up?
c'est quoi le
Yes.
message que le général Air
So,
voudrait donner
what is
à
the
ses
message
troupes
General
et quel est
Air
le
would
moral
like to
de ses
send out
troupes?
to his troops? What is the morale of the troops like right now?
Well, it's no surprise this has hit us all very hard, especially those of us who spent part of our lives in that country. My message to the troops who are involved in this operation is focus on those that we got out. I had this conversation with one of my staff several days ago, and he told me, sir, if we save one life, it is worth it. So I asked my troops to focus on that, focus on the lives that we saved, live their lives as our fallen would wish them to live them. Focus on being better each and every day, and we'll get through this.
Thank you. Merci. There are no further questions registered. Il n'y a plus de questions à ce moment-ci. I'll now turn the call back to Mr. Bill Brown. De retour à vous, Mr. Brown.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the speakers and to everyone for participating. Merci tout le monde pour être là aujourd'hui. Follow-up questions can be sent to the appropriate media relations teams. Pour d'autres questions, veuillez communiquer avec les équipes de relations avec les médias. Contact information is on the media advisory sent out last night. Have a good day et bonne journée.
When data and software engineering meet, highly rewarding careers are built. Become an in-demand professional with advanced software skills in data science. Introducing the Postgraduate Certificate in Software Engineering for Data Science from IIIT Hyderabad in collaboration with Great Learning. It's designed for tech professionals looking to build data science engineering capabilities and is taught by world-class IIITH faculty and industry experts. Choose dedicated learning pathways and learn industry-relevant skills with project-driven learning. Get career support from Great Learning with resume review, interview preparation, and career guidance sessions. Build a rewarding career at the intersection of data science and software engineering. Apply today.
"7 days. That is the deadline for the US and NATO forces. 7 days is all they have to exit the Kabul airport. They must evacuate themselves. They must airlift the thousands of Afghans who were promised a safe exit. It's a Herculean task. Evacuating everyone may not be possible. All sides know this. So the desperation is rising by the day. The chaos at the airport has become a full-blown crisis. The Taliban are blocking the roads leading up to the airport to prevent Afghans from leaving. The US and its allies are blocking the gates of the airport to prevent Afghans from entering. It's such a sorry state of affairs. Hundreds of people are trying to scale the airport walls to get inside. Many of them ended up falling in